Our mission here at Unity 5 Cities is that we are a heart-centered community dedicated to empowering spiritual growth and living the unlimited life of spirit. And so as the minister, it's my great joy to see us live out this mission and what it means for us individually and as a community. And so, as I open my heart and follow my spiritual guidance, I have the great opportunity to present some opportunities to folks in our community. And many of you know out there that the universe is calling you. Don't ever doubt it. The universe is calling you, and you're here to answer that call. And so, it gives me such a great deal of joy to present our speaker who answered the call. And that's Ethel Tink Landers.
Am I on, guys? I didn't dare turn this mic on when I was singing that song, or you guys would have been out of here, let me tell you. Good morning. Your faces, your energy. Look at Brian's smile. I mean, it's beautiful in here. The love is thick in here. And, I have to stop before I take my notes here. I want to thank Richard Inman and the One Mighty Light Choir. But Richard is the perfect example of giving his light, his love to others. We are so blessed, guys. We are so blessed. And when we're in those choir practices, we're filling Brian and Kathy's living room, basically, and it's half men, half women, and Richard brings it out of us. Gosh, I'd like to go every week and just keep developing, but woohoo! Thank you, Richard. It is such a gift, his dedication. As we were saying, last month's theme was finding our purpose. And I know it's a little late, but I want to praise Rita Conrad. She's leading us in this book study. And if you're not in it, may I add, it's, this book is worth every cent. It's called The Quest for Meaning, Living a Life of Purpose by, how do you say his name? Jim Rosemurky? Rosemurky, you've probably met him, right? So a Unity minister. See, it's not horribly thick, guys. But what's great is there's work sections after each chapter. And they're so meaningful. They're so meaningful. Actually, one of the work sections, remember this, Rita, was to take a stuffed animal and just hold it to your heart. Remember when you were little? Remember when you did that? And it brings love back up and out. So this is Thumper, and I'm going to pass him around during the service. Would you just take whatever feels comfortable, hold him to your heart, let that love come up, and then pass him to your neighbor. Let Thumper make the rounds, okay? So I'm going to step out of the camera for a second. And, again, this month's theme is wisdom. Wisdom. What image or icons come to your mind when you think of wisdom? Owl, the wise old owl. Maybe Confucius, the wise old man. Notice how we say old about wisdom. And, on the board, I happen to be the facilitator this year, which I love that title instead of the president, because we're all facilitators, aren't we? Let's facilitate our growth. Let's facilitate one another's. But when you look around this room, and when you look there on Zoom, we're going to see a lot of wisdom. Our demographic is everyone that's about 55 and older. We've got wisdom, don't we, gang? And I don't know about you, but life experience brings me that much more wisdom every day. But I'd like to share a couple of memories with you about Easter. Easter was always just a real special day to me. And my first memories go back to when I was about 7 years old, the ones I really remember. A few of you know my story that I was adopted at birth. Actually, I was 3 days old, and I was adopted by a wonderful couple. They were poor, they were a little bit older, but I got to go home to a big old Indiana farmhouse. Now, they didn't own it. They were running the farm for someone else. But I got to go home. And for the first 3 years of my life, I didn't have kids in my life. I had adults and I had animals. Every kind of animal, guys. You know, we had dogs and cats and birds and fish in the house, but we also had chickens and ducks, because when they'd lay eggs, Mama would bring those in a big old cardboard box, put a warm light over them. So I grew up with animals. And there is so much wisdom in animals. Those of you who have a pet, I know the choir's blessed to meet Pierre whenever we go, whenever we go practice. And there's wisdom in animals, and we could all learn from that. But what I remember most, by the time I was 7, by then, Pep had talked Fanny into moving clear across the country. How we ever did that, I don't know, because she insisted we take all the animals with us. And I was young, so I don't remember the trip. But she used to tell stories of, she told him, you got to haul us all across. If we're going to move clear across to the West Coast, you're going to take all of us. Somehow he bought a flatbed truck for $59. The story in the family goes, it was supposed to be $590, and the guy made a mistake, the salesman. But the story goes, Daddy put this old plywood sides on it and a plywood top, and we moved the animals, anything that we owned, and me and all our stuff and the fish tanks, everything moved to Beaver Creek, Oregon. Now there's a metropolis, isn't there? That's Beaver Creek. And what I remember is Easter morning, maybe you did this too, I would come into the living room and there would be this wicker basket. You guys remember that? Did some of you have that tradition? And this wicker basket had scrunchy paper in it that was supposed to be grass. And I would dig down and there's jelly beans and there's a chocolate bunny. Somehow we afforded that. They were so great as parents. And there were eggs. There were colored eggs all over the place. It's like, wow, all these eggs. Now I was only 7, but I knew rabbits didn't lay eggs. I mean, I grew up with all these animals. So me questioning Easter traditions, that started early. And in spite of the questions, of course, I continued the tradition with my sons as I raised them. The basket morphed into some plastic basket. And of course, the scrunchy paper turned into cellophane. And besides jelly beans and chocolate, there were, Peeps and Cadbury eggs. And I just want to give you a secret. If you get your drugs at Costco San Luis Obispo, take a Cadbury egg to the head pharmacist. You're going to get some extra attention. Sorry, Scott. That's my son. But he still loves them. He's out of town right now. So I started my Easter morning cleaning his cat's box. So, I still love him. But back to my early Easters. Fanny, again, was poor, but she was a seamstress. So every Easter, I had a new dress. And let me digress. This dress belongs to Joni. Joni gave out clothes. Our last choir practice, Joni gave us some of her clothes, and many of us here today have Joni's clothes on. So we're going to have, there's Joni. This one's from India, I believe. The other one she gave me is from Turkey. And I love you, Joni, and I so appreciate I'm going to have part of you with us and with me when you move to Morocco. So thank you so much. She's promised she's going to join us on Zoom, by the way. So anyway, every year, Fanny would make me a little dress. And we would go to the little Baptist church in the village there near Oregon City. And what would happen, Pep chose not to go. Pep was my dad. Oh, I love my dad so much. And sadly, I lost him when I was 10 years old. I mean, he dropped dead in the doorway to my bedroom. His heart stopped at age 48. It was something. And guys, it affects us, right? Those things affect us all our life. But I love, love, love Pep. I know he's still with me. And he found God in nature. So he didn't choose to go to the little Baptist church, but he would go out in nature and he'd go fishing or he would grow. No matter where we lived, guys, our yard was full of roses and dahlias. Oh, he had a touch with growing nature. And that's how he touched God. And in fact, the painting behind me, I did in his memory and dedicated it to him. So he is always with me in my home. My dad, very, very special person. But Fanny and I would go to the little Baptist church and we would enter there and it was a spectacle on Easter. Oh my gosh. The women had these fancy dresses, big hats, kind of like what we have here today. And the men usually had their suits on and their ties, right? Oh, I'm touching things. I'm sorry, guys. They usually would have ties up tight, right? And I would run into that church. I should say I would hobble into that church all the way down to the front pew. And I would plop myself right in front of that Baptist preacher. And I say I hobbled because somehow Fanny afforded to buy me some new patent leather shoes from Woolworths. Now, they aren't known for the best shoe quality, but they looked good. Okay, so I would prop right down there in that front row. And Fanny had tried to keep me in Sunday school. She really had done her best. And I put up with it for a little while when we moved there. But first of all, the stories were so repetitive for the kids, and the boys were rowdy. I'm pointing at Richard. The boys were rowdy. And on top of that, we would have drawing time, and inevitably they would hand out these big crayons. Remember those big ones that were huge? I mean, for a little kid, that was like, trying to take a flashlight to draw something with. And the teacher would go, "Draw the face of God." Well, how do you draw God? So anyway, I talked Fanny. I said, "Fanny, please let me go into the big church." So there I was, right in front of that Baptist preacher. And I loved the stories. I got to go in there about Christmas time the year before. And I loved the story of Jesus. Oh my gosh, Mary and Joseph and riding a donkey and going to Bethlehem. And they were poor, just like us. And they couldn't afford a Motel 6 or anything. No, they ended up sleeping in a stable with animals. There were horses and cattle and there's sheep and Jesus was born right there. And I loved the fact they were sleeping with animals because I still do. It's probably why I'm still single, but oh well. In any event, I love the stories of Jesus. And from Christmas forward, I heard the best stories. I mean, Jesus raised the dead. Jesus loved people. I mean, he saved that lady that they were going to stone to death, right? Jesus loved people. He was a rebel. He was standing up for the little guy. And then here I am on Easter Sunday in that little church, and I'm looking around, and a couple of guys must have hauled in these big crosses, and they had draped them in material. There were these huge crosses. And that Baptist preacher kept going on and on about these bad guys killing Jesus, and that Jesus was killed. He was crucified because of my sins. Now I'm 7. And I always was an inquisitive kid because remember, I wasn't raised with other kids. I was raised with adults and animals. And I'm thinking, my sin caused Jesus to be killed. And I do remember one thing. One time they passed the collection plate. there was an Indian head nickel on there. And I wanted that, so I slipped it on. Yeah, if I still had it, if I could find it, Marv, it'd be worth something, wouldn't it? I think I need to give Brian a nickel when they pass the plate this time, because I never gave it back. But this business about Jesus being killed for my sins, or for Pep and Fanny's, I was so perplexed. And so, since I'm in the front row and he's right there, I raise my hand. And that preacher can give a stink eye, let me tell you. So he gave me the stink eye, and Fanny made me put my arm down. But I still had that question. You know, he went on to talk about when Jesus died on the cross and then was taken to the tomb, right, to the tomb, and put in the tomb, and this big stone was rolled in front of the tomb, so nobody could get the body. And so I pondered that. And then the preacher went on and said, he read from the Bible in Luke 24. It talks about Jesus's mother, Mary, and then Mary Magdalene, and then Salome. And it says, on the first day of the week at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking spices they had prepared, and they found the stone had been rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and they bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? So I'm thinking, you know, I wasn't confused by that. That part made sense to me. Because, you know, I entitled this talk, Wisdom of All Ages, even though we have that image in our mind that wisdom only comes when we're old. But in fact, it's my belief, we are born with the seed of wisdom from all ages. All ages. Now, true, children develop their humanity over time, their human bodies, but their spirit, that spirit down inside, is amazing. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure in several cases, you've seen that in your own baby, your own children. So it didn't take me long for my inner being, whatever word you want to give to it. You want to give it soul, inner being, your authentic self. It didn't take me long to really get the heart of the messages. And that's been true for me whether I was 7 or 70. I have gone to churches of all denominations. I've been blessed to be in Buddhist temples in Hanoi, in Bangkok, in Cambodia, at Angkor Wat. I have been blessed to worship around the world. And you know what? When we sink into that special place that Judy was talking about, we have a knowing. We have discernment. We can take a deep breath and get out of these and drop into here, and God comes through loud and clear, right? In her book, A Return to Love, Marianne Williamson says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Now that's something, isn't it? We are most frightened by our light, not our darkness. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, to be gorgeous, talented, fabulous? And actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. No. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, guys. It's in you. It is. And it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. We are liberated from our own fear. Think of that. We're liberated from our own fear. It kind of seems to me almost like that cave that they put Jesus in. It's like when we let that light shine, we're pulling away any rock we have in front of our heart, and we're letting our light out. And it automatically liberates others. And that's what Marianne Williamson says. As young children, we know this. We feel it in our bones. I mean, we have the wisdom of all ages, because if you truly, in your heart, know, as Brian shared with us today, our second principle, that we are spiritual beings. Yes, we're having a human experience. And yes, we are created in the image of God, and therefore each one of us is inherently good. And it's my belief we're also inherently wise, because that seed's down inside of us. All we need to do is kind of, blow away that humanity and get back in touch with the real us. Now, in Matthew 18, 1-5, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Now, isn't that just like a group of adults? Who does God love best? Me? And Jesus called a little child to him and placed the child among them and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like the children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." And, children had a hard time, especially during the days of Jesus. They really did. Father Lawrence Jagfeld writes that in Jewish families, it was very common for multi-generations to live in one household. And he says that either an elder father or an elder brother would be the patriarch, and the men would all live basically in the front part of the house to protect the families, and then the women would be at the back. And the children were allowed to go back and forth. And he says the children were allowed to go roam between sections of the house, and they often carried gossip between the men's sections and the women's section. So the children in those days were like little carrier pigeons. So it wasn't unusual for people like the disciples of Jesus to want to shoo him away. When they were meeting with Jesus, it's like, oh, here comes one of those carrier pigeons again. Go. They were trying to protect Jesus. I wonder if that's why that Baptist preacher didn't want me on the front row. We got all dressed up to hear how our sinning had caused Jesus to be killed. And it's interesting, you probably know that the word sin in Aramaic is really an archery term that means we're missing the mark. But I knew, even instinctively back then, that the real story of Easter is love. It's love. And it sunk in. I got a lot of information, and it sunk in. Now, unity is considered to be mystical Christianity. I love that part. And I bet if I could get all of you to stay for a couple hours and we shared with each other some mystical experiences we've had, that would be an Easter celebration. But I want to share with you one more story before I close. I'm grown up now, and I'm 52 years old, and I'm in Bangkok, Thailand. And I'd been there for 4 weeks. I had gone to Thailand with a group of Cal Poly students and a few professors. I had actually put myself back through school to get my art degree when I was 50, so I was right at the cusp of graduating. So I was a senior, especially at Cal Poly. But I had the opportunity to go and study abroad. And so I did with about 40 other students. And I was really blessed. My younger son, Adam, went with us, and it was such a blessing. at times to worship with him in the different Buddhist temples. But it was, approaching Easter, and as we know, schools let out for a week at Easter time, and anymore I think they call it spring break. They don't call it Easter break anymore. But it was approaching, and the professors had planned to take all of us down south of Bangkok, way down into the Gulf of Thailand, and go snorkeling at Koh Samui. It's just absolutely gorgeous. If you haven't been to Thailand, go if you can. It's fabulous. But I and one other student, we decided, no, we'd have our own little trek. And because we were like the age of everyone's parents or maybe grandparents by that time. And so I stayed behind. We had a set of apartments in a little bit distant community near Bangkok, and it was called Bangkok Noi. And I needed to get into Bangkok because I had arranged with a Thai friend to visit an orphanage that day. And so the night before, it was so quiet in our apartments because all the kids were gone. And I fell into the deepest sleep, guys. I don't know how to describe it. It was almost like I was in another world. Have you ever had that feeling when you get so deep and it was so quiet? And I was on that white beach, and there's this turquoise ocean out in front of me. And I'm standing there, and a figure is walking toward me. And I'm trying to make out who it is. And then I see his eyes, and I see his smile. And it's my dad. It's Pep. Oh, it's Pep. And he's visiting me. And he came up to me, and he grabbed me in his arms. Now remember, I'm 52, and he passed when I was 10. But he holds me, and it's giving me chills right now, guys. But he holds me, and he reassures me that he's been with me throughout my life. He is proud of me. He loves me. He knows my sons. He knows his grandsons. He just blesses me. He says, I love you. I'm with you always. And he also praised me for helping Fanny. Fanny stayed with me until I was 49. She was 84 when she passed. And he knew that. And he says, we are all together and we're with you. Oh my gosh, Easter morning, and I'm having this. I am in such a deep, deep state. And then the bells start ringing. And when you, at least back, this was 2003, back in those days, and it probably still is, the monks come through the villages, come through the actually, even in the main part of town, and they're ringing bells, and they have a bowl, and they're asking for some rice, they're asking for their food to be donated. So I came to, kind of tried to shake it off, had a shower, went downstairs, and we had a little kitchen outside, and a lady would make us breakfast. So I ordered my favorite, khao tam gai, and that's chicken and rice soup. So I sat down at a little table. There's no one else there. And a gecko comes up on the table. And so I took some rice, and I'm giving him rice. And I look down, and there's these beautiful cement bowls, large ones, filled with water lilies. And in that water, inside was guppies, because you're in the tropics, so you can have tropical fish outside year round. And that reminded me of Fanny. She loved to breed guppies and get the biggest tails on those male fish. Up into her 80s, we had fish. And so I flagged down a tuk-tuk. Have you been on tuk-tuks? How many people have been on tuk-tuk? There's a tuk-tuk. There we go. Tuk-tuks are, for those of you who've not ridden one, it's kind of like a moped or a motorcycle with a little covering on it. And then there's a bench seat behind it, and you're usually covered completely. But, someone was going to drive you through the traffic where you're going to go. And in Bangkok in these days, the main highways were about 6 lanes wide, and you had tuk-tuks, you had motorcycles, you had big buses and big trucks. and occasionally an ox cart, and occasionally an elephant. We're all in this together. And I got across town, and my friend was there at the orphanage ready to meet me. And she explained to me, she had a bag of toys, and she explained to me, we're first going to go in with the 6 to 8 year olds. And we're going to play with them on the playground. And then we're going to go up and see the babies. And so we went out, and I'm like the only white lady there, right? Everyone else is speaking Thai. I know this much Thai that we've been taught in school. And so I'm interacting with the kids, and they're hugging you, and they're having such joy. And we're handing out candies, and we're handing out toys. And then my friend said, it's time to go see the babies. So we walked up the 3 sets of stairs and up to the top. And I enter a room about this size, but it was divided, kind of like where our posts are there. It was divided with a wall that came up about 4 feet and then glass. And behind that wall were row after row of cribs stacked together, so many babies. And, I never asked the ages, but they were big enough to pull themselves up and kind of jump, and they were ready to get out of there because, they knew it's visitor time. So we were asked to get down on the floor, and there were a few plastic toys out there, and they started bringing baby after baby out. Oh, it was such a joy. And you're playing, there was a little piano, a toy piano. There's a ball, you're playing with them. And there's all these little kids, and there were about 5 of us there. And I noticed this little guy, just, about 6 feet away from me. And he had his back to me, and he's sitting up. So I'm thinking, what, maybe 8, 9 months old, something like that. But people try to play with him. He's not playing. And so I did as much as I could with the others. And then I thought, I'm the oldest in the room, and I need to get off this floor. And so I got up and got into a chair over fairly close to him. And I simply reached my hands down, and he looked at me. He caught my eyes, and then he crawled to me. And he went like this. So I picked him up, and I put him on my knee. And I only speak English. I wasn't quite sure how to interact with this little guy. What am I going to do? I was trying to get him to smile. He just had this inquisitive look, but he held my eyes. So I tucked him in. I thought, what did I do with my boys? So I tucked him into my arm, and I said, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. And I look down. He has a grin from here to here. He's smiling, we're eye contact. So I spend the rest of my time giggling with him and rocking him and holding him tight. And then another bell goes off. And it's the bell to take the babies back into the room. And I don't want to let him go. And I'm 52, I'm single, I've got money, but not a whole lot. And I'm thinking, could I adopt him? I'm an American visiting. Could I take him home? And I know it's quite complicated to do that. And I realized it really wasn't going to work. But the lady finally came to get him. So I gave him one last hug, and I kissed his head. And then she called his name, Pep, Pep. And she said in Thai, it's time to go in the back. That baby's name was my dad's name. Guys, I lost it then, and I'm about to lose it now. So God works in mysterious ways, right? So when we open ourselves, as Jesus opened himself to all the people, miracles happen. It said Jesus walked this earth about 32 years, I think. Some differ on that amount of years, but he never forgot his spiritual purpose. Yes, we are human beings. We stumble, we fail. But each and every one of us are filled with spirit. We are spiritual beings having this human experience. And I go back to being 7 years old, sitting on that bench, that pew, back there at that little Baptist church just outside of Oregon City. And I'm pondering what this minister's saying, what this preacher's saying about my sin. And then I go, wait a minute. This is what came to me. What came to me was that those guys, those Romans, the Roman government, the Jewish temple leaders, they killed Jesus, not because of anything I did or you did. They killed Jesus because they were afraid of him. They were afraid of the love that was coming up and out of him. He was connecting with everyone. He was connecting with the poor. He was connecting with the average working guy. He was connecting with the women and the children. Jesus was connecting with people. Those guys couldn't handle that. Jesus spoke truth to power, and they didn't want him around anymore, right? But what Jesus did was he empowered people by that little seed that's in you and I. He opened that up. Now, again, in these human experiences over time, we close that off. Little kids have it. Little kids are connected to God immediately. But as we grow in this human experience, things happen, right? Your dad dies when you're 10 years old. Your mom dies. Your husband leaves you unexpectedly. There's loss, there's financial burden, and you wall that heart off. But now's the day. Just as we said in Richard's song, it's time to move that rock, right? It's time to open that special place in you. The wisdom of Easter is remembering what it says in Matthew 22, 37 through 40. There is truly only one commandment, and that is to love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And then to love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? Judy was saying that along with me. The wisdom of Easter is remembering that love is our purpose. And it's our birthright. So it's time today, please, let's go inside. Let's move that rock. And let's let the love shine. Thank you.